It is time for another reading wrap up, and I just want to say right off the bat that April, weird month for me, man. Weird month. And I actually checked because I was convinced something weird and mystical was going on with April because I just felt in a strange funk. I checked last year, and last April I didn't read nearly as much either, so I blame April. Totally not on me. This is the lowest I've read in the year so far. I think I read 7 books for a total of 2,256 pages. Proof. And for me, that is pretty low. But that's okay, darling. Honestly, what ho? We can't control everything. I don't know why I just said what ho, but it seemed like a good expression at the time. Oi with the poodles already. Let's get into it. Also, if you got that Gilmore Girls reference, 10,000 points to you. Let's be friends. Come over, we'll have pizza, candy, Gilmore Girls style it up. Boom. Let's do it. I'll see you there. Anyways, on to the reading wrap up. If you've been here before, then you know how this works. I split it up by books that I recommend that you buy, books that I thought were middle of the road, just okay, worth a read maybe if you're interested in it, but maybe not worth your money, and then books I thought that you should probably skip because girl, they ain't worth your time. You're ready, I'm ready, let's get into this thing. All right, before we get into the actual regular fiction, I have to admit to you that I finally finished this. It finally happened. If you don't remember, ages, eons, lifetimes ago, I put together a coffee table video and I was saying how I wanted to read more of my vintage nonfiction, Exhibit A, and I put this on the coffee table and it did work. However, it took me a heck of a long time. Keep in mind that this is a really old book. What is this from? 1930s? Somewhere in there. It's a book for boys, Nature's Secrets. There's literally a section called Mammals Every Boy Should Know. Girls, you don't need to know it, it's irrelevant to you. The point is, it's exactly what my biology nerdy self needed. It just took me a long time. It's old-fashioned writing, and there's a lot of different sections in there. But I will say the experience was supremely enjoyable, and it took me so long that once I finished it, I felt strangely emotional about it, you know? It was like we were pals. We hung out together for like 4 months. That's a long time. And now I have to say goodbye. But it will live on our shelves for as long as we can possibly hold it. And it was just fun. I really want to read more of my nonfiction, my vintage stuff, and this is why. This is like a window into a different world, and it was very cool. I don't want to go on too long because you can't buy this, which is kind of a bummer. I found like one related copy online, but it's very expensive and it's not the same. I don't know. Anyways, let's get into the fiction books that are actually more relevant to the modern world. Let's do it. I have an extremely important question for you. Have you seen The Godfather? If you're not saying yes, then we need to have a serious conversation. The Godfather is one of the best movies of all time, okay? And this is coming from a movie nerd buff person, all right? I'm telling you, if you haven't seen The Godfather, you absolutely must. I will force you into it, so don't test me. But don't feel too bad because admittedly, it also took me a long time to get on the Godfather train. I only saw it for the first time like maybe 3 years, I don't even know, a couple years ago? I'm honestly not sure anymore, but the point is, what a waste of life before me seeing that movie because it's that fantastic. You probably know it without knowing that you know it. There's all sorts of lines from it like, leave the gun, take the cannoli, revenge is a dish best served cold, Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes. I mean, there's a bazillion lines that you've probably heard of and you might not even know that that's where it comes from. So, your first assignment, yes, I am now giving you assignments, is to go watch the movie and then read the book. And you are going to discover that it is quite possibly the best filmed movie adaptation, right up there on par with The Lord of the Rings, directed by Peter Jackson. It's truly fantastic. I did this book as the book pick of the week on my blog. I loved it that much. I can tell I'm getting a little aggressive, so I'm gonna tone it back. The point is, it's a fantastic book. I can't even describe it because it's too epic. Just please, I'm begging you, go read it. This is the newest edition. It's from Berkeley. They did lovingly send it to me, so thank you, Berkeley. And it has a new introduction by the director of the movies, which was really fun to read, and I did read that. And then an afterword that has a little more info as well. Also, a quick note on writing style. Something I found fascinating about this was that there's almost no description. It's almost entirely action and thought, which is just fascinating and actually really cool because while you'd think you would miss the flowery descriptions and stuff, what it actually enables you to do is just sort of take control of the visuals of it all, and I thought it was really fun. When Mario Puzo wrote this, he had already written a few books which were really well critically acclaimed, but then they did not do very well. Like financially, like commercially, they were unsuccessful, but from the critics loved it. The public, just couldn't care less. So he decided that he was done like paying his dues, and he decided to, in his terms, sell out. And he said, I'm gonna sit down and write a bestseller, and that's exactly what he did. The movie version came out like a year or two after the book. So I mean, I think he did it, man. I think he did it. I know I talked about The Godfather for a long time, and trust me, you're lucky I didn't go on longer because it's that good. Anyways, let's move on. I think it's time. I had myself a little reread party this month, or last month I should say, reading Holes. This, if you saw my weekend reading vlog, I went to the library book sale and got this for $1. I couldn't resist it. Well, I felt like it was sitting there on the shelf staring at me, and I simply had to have it, had to read it again, and I'm so glad I did because it's just as good as I remember. This, in my opinion, is as YA should be. This is like a middle grade book. There's like a lot of adventure in this book. There's a lot of, not violence per se, but just like there's some harder topics in here. And I think it's done so well. This could easily be a huge epic work. It could have been scaled to an adult book and just really gone into like excruciating detail and told all this story, because all the elements of a fantastic epic are here. It's just that they've been simplified and made really approachable for a younger audience, and that, in my opinion, is what makes it so fantastic and so long lasting. What I found out when I posted about this on Instagram is that lots of people that don't live in the US have not heard of this, which to me is crazy because when I was a kid, this was huge. At least in the US apparently. So if you live in the UK, this might be a really fun middle grade read for you to pick out for your kids or for yourself. You know me, I don't judge you. Whatever you want to read, you read it. And it's just really, really enjoyable. There's also a movie that I really loved. So what I did is I reread my $1 copy and then I watched the movie, and it was a heck of a lot of fun. Just in case you don't know the basic plot line here, this is about a kid who gets wrongfully accused of a crime, and then he gets sent to a work camp for kids to build character. And the way that they build character is by digging 6-foot holes, 6 foot deep, 6 foot wide, and that's how they spend every day. What you find out learning though is that there's a lot more interconnections going on here. There's a purpose that's not just about building character behind digging the holes. The warden might be looking for something, and she's hoping that these kids might help her find it. There's also some intergenerational storytelling going on here that I won't ruin for you because it's part of the magic as you read it. But yeah, just a really good book, and I hope that the next generations continue to read this one. Next is another young adult book, but not middle grade, just young adult, and my golly, was it hard to read. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a critical way. I just mean it's hard to read in the sense that it's very sad, very real, and for that reason, in my opinion, pretty important. It's How to Make Friends with the Dark by Kathleen Glasgow. And it's about a girl named Tiger Tolliver whose mother passes away, and she then has to deal with all the grief. The book is told before and after. It's mostly a book about loss, whether that's a loss caused by grief or just a feeling of being lost within the world. This book made me think a lot. And that to me is an indicator of a truly great read. I think this is going to be on par with books like Speak, Go Ask Alice. It's just one of those YA novels that I think isn't afraid to say what it needs to say, and it handles grief with a lot of grace and a lot of honesty, which is what I really appreciated about it. That being said, because it was a sadder book, it took me longer to read, and that's okay. It was completely worth it, and I definitely recommend it. I hope that you read it or that you gift it to someone down the road who might need it. Those are all the books that I really recommend, that I really enjoyed, that I say if you have the opportunity to read them, girl, please do it, okay? Peer pressure. It's happening from me to you. You should read those. Now I want to talk really quickly about 2 books that are definitely middle of the road reads, and they're also kind of like outside of the norm. There are more books from the library that are about like building your own small house. So I know that's not really relevant or interesting to a lot of people, but I did read them, so I have to include them. It's a reading wrap up, hello. So I'm just gonna do it really quickly. They were The Not So Big House, which was a book that was sort of written in response to the McMansion craze, where people were spending a lot of money to have these big houses, but it was quantity over quality. So she was writing a book to say, this is silly. Let's really build houses with more intention and thought for like individual families and how they use space and what their needs are, instead of just having these vast empty cookie cutter homes that, you know, may impress and may sell, but once you're living in them, they don't really feel like much. It's definitely kind of an outdated book at this point, but I still enjoyed what she had to say. And I have another one by the same author that I'm gonna read this month in May that I hope is sort of just as enlightening. These aren't like amazing books or anything. They're just sort of good to flip through if you're interested in that sort of thing. And then the second one I read was The House You Build, which was supposed to be a book about using cost-benefit analysis to get the best materials for your budget and for the lifetime of your house. I felt like the premise was great, but it didn't really deliver. The only thing that was good about it was it's one of the few books that actually mentions the full budget of the entire house, which is pretty interesting when you're thinking about this in a practical sense, like what could I do in a few years, you know? So anyway, they weren't like amazing. They're definitely middle of the road books, and they were the only middle of the road books I read in April, which is pretty good. Like I wasn't mad at them or anything. They just didn't blow my mind. So now I want to talk about a book that is really on the edge, and this is a tricky one for me to review. The writing itself is definitely worthy of a borrow it verdict, but the execution I felt like was definitely like a skip it. Like overall, I do not recommend this, is what I'm trying to say. That book is Stiff by Mary Roach. It's supposed to be a book about the lives of cadavers, or bodies that are donated to science, essentially, like what they go through, what they're used for, and the decision-making process, basically any aspect you can think of that goes into cadaver research. So here's the story. When I first started reading this, I quite liked the writing style. I thought, just from the introduction, I thought I'm really gonna like this. I liked her sort of witty approach. She definitely had humor, and you know me, dude, like, I read horror, I'm a biology major, I was a biology major. I have kind of a thick skin for gory stuff, right? So I have an interest in the scientific aspect of these things. So I want you to know when I say this that this isn't coming from someone who is like inexperienced in this area, okay? What kind of freaked me out about this book was the lack of tact. I think that's the best way I can say it. So in the introduction, she was kind of making jokes a little bit about death and how death is funny. And I can see what she's saying, and I agree that parts of death in a weird way are funny. Like, it's kind of funny to laugh at your own mortality in a way. A lot of comedians do this really well. Like, there's a certain angle there, right? There's a certain like dark satire that happens. However, there is a time and there's a place and there's a limit. At a certain point, it turns kind of disrespectful. And that's what I felt like happened. I felt like the author would just insert jokes when she should not have. She would sort of poke fun when she should have kept her mouth shut. And I think that's a tricky thing to know. And it's a tricky thing like for your audience too, because I bet you some people read it and didn't care at all, and I bet you a lot of people like me read it and thought the exact same thing. And I actually read the Goodreads reviews after, and it seems like a lot of people felt a similar way, where it was just like, you can't, well, you can say that, but maybe you shouldn't. Like, maybe that wasn't the best time for you to insert that joke. Like, these are real people, you know? Like, it's kind of messed up. So that made it hard for me and hard to get through. Now, on another level, the gore in this book is so intense that it actually really kind of freaked me out. It gave me a lot of anxiety in a weird way. There's a lot of stuff I didn't want to know. And another complaint of mine went too far beyond the scope of cadavers. It was like it was supposed to be about cadavers, but then she just kind of got distracted and went on little tangents that had something to do with it, but not really. And it wasn't that the scenes themselves were so gory. Like, I've read grosser things, you know? But it was the way she did it, and I think, frankly, it was this sort of false, awkward humor that made it seem grosser than it was. If you have a sensitive stomach, then you probably, like, I wouldn't ever recommend to you that you read books like this anyways, but just coming from someone who does have a tolerance for it, who's saying it was a little much, I don't know, something to think about. This is a book I got on Audible on one of their 2-for-1 sales, and I have not had good luck with those. For some reason, I get those books and I'm so excited about them, and then they kind of let me down, so another one bites the dust. I do want to say that her writing style was really good, and that's why it makes it hard for me, like, because structurally there was nothing wrong. You know, it was just, it lacked tact and it lacked focus. So it kind of is like a middle of the road. I can't give it a 2-star because I thought, you know, quality-wise it was fine. But I also just don't recommend it. Make sense? Okay. All right, my dear, that is the 7 books that I read in April. I want to thank you for being patient with me as I filmed this video. I know it's later than usual, and usually I'm pretty on top of it. I just had a weird month in April, like in my brain machine. I don't know, you know? It was just a weird month. I blame the Nargles. Here's to May, and hopefully just a better, more well-rounded month ahead. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a quick thumbs up, drop me a comment below, let me know what book was your favorite or least favorite in April. I'd love to hear about it. I love the juicy details, you know that. And if you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, but you like all things bookish, book reviews, TBRs, book hauls, just good nerdiness, then I'm your girl. So go ahead and press that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.